When Jasmine Crockett's luxury Bentley broke down on a desolate Texas road, she stumbled upon a forgotten garage and a 72-year-old mechanic named Walter Grayson, working alone with dust-filled lungs and a heart just one cough away from stopping. 1 week later, she came back, and what she built inside that garage stunned the entire city. It didn't just repair engines, it rebuilt lives. So what made one of the most powerful lawyers in America fight for a man the world had almost completely forgotten? Stay with us. This is a story worth every second of your time. The sun was bleeding into the horizon, staining the Texas sky a deep, uneasy orange. Jasmine Crockett gripped the leather steering wheel of her vintage Bentley, her jaw tight, eyes burning with frustration. She had just walked out of a courthouse where justice had once again been manipulated, twisted by wealth, hidden behind smiles, and served to those with power while the powerless were left to rot. The echo of the judge's final ruling still rang in her head like a gavel made of stone, and silence. Her phone buzzed uselessly, no signal. And that's when it happened. The Bentley shuddered once, twice, and then died, coughing out a final metallic gasp before falling still in the middle of a desolate back road, lined with brittle grass and fading white lines. Jasmine cursed under her breath, stepping out into the thick air, her heels clicking against the cracked asphalt. A dusty wind swept through, carrying the faint scent of oil, old rust, and resignation. She scanned the empty landscape, nothing but telephone poles stretching into nowhere, until, barely visible through the settling dusk, she spotted a warped wooden sign swinging above a corrugated tin building. Grayson's Auto. She stared at the sign above the garage. Grayson's Auto, barely hanging by one rusted chain, the paint so faded it was almost gone. No cars passed by, no voices, no signal, nothing but wind and quiet. Jasmine Crockett knew what it felt like to be on her own. She'd spent years standing in courtrooms where justice was just a word and power always won. Now she was stranded, alone, in the middle of nowhere, and the silence felt too familiar. She walked across the gravel, her heels crunching with every step. The building looked like it had been forgotten, dust on the windows, weeds growing up through cracks in the concrete. She grabbed the garage door and gave it a push. It opened slow and heavy, groaning like it hadn't moved in a long time. Inside it was dim. The air smelled like oil, old rubber, and something burned into the walls. Then she heard footsteps, slow, steady. A man stepped out from behind a truck, older, tall but a little hunched, wearing a dirty cap and holding a rag in one hand. Walter Grayson. His hands were black with grease, his clothes worn and stained. His eyes were clear, sharp. Jasmine didn't speak. She didn't have to. She could tell he was sizing her up, wondering what someone like her was doing here. He didn't offer a handshake, didn't ask if she needed water or where she came from. Just gave the car a quick glance, let out a quiet grunt, and walked straight toward the Bentley like it was any other machine. Jasmine followed, a little tense, not from fear, but from familiarity. This wasn't the first time someone had treated her like a mystery that didn't need solving. But there was something different about Walter Grayson. He didn't ignore her out of disrespect. He ignored her like a man who'd spent years dealing with things that broke and didn't have time for small talk. As he reached for the hood, he paused just briefly, gave her a glance, and said in a voice rough like sandpaper, "Afternoon." Jasmine nodded, steady, meeting his eyes. "Hey." It wasn't warm, but it was enough. He reached under the hood, found the latch without looking, and popped it open. The metal rose slowly, held by an old, creaky strut that looked like it could give out at any second. Jasmine stepped to the side, out of habit, giving him space. The air under the hood was still hot, smelling of fuel and old rubber. He leaned in slightly, scanning with his eyes, listening. Then, without turning, he asked, "What's she been doing?" Jasmine replied, stuttered twice, then gave out. No warning. He gave a small grunt, more to the car than to her. "Figures." Walter didn't reach for a diagnostic tool. No code reader, no laptop. He leaned in, eyes narrowed, and listened. Actually listened. Jasmine watched, half curious, half skeptical. Most mechanics she dealt with were loud, fast-talking, full of jargon and ego. This man didn't say a word. He ran his fingers along a hose, pressed gently on a connection, tapped the side of a valve, like he was having a quiet conversation with the machine. Then he stepped back, walked to a nearby tool cart, and pulled out a wrench. No hesitation, no second guesses, just pure instinct. Jasmine crossed her arms and leaned slightly against the wall, her eyes never leaving him. There was something almost unsettling about his focus, like the rest of the world had been turned off. The only sound was the clink of metal on metal, the turn of bolts, the short hiss of pressure being released. He wiped sweat from his brow with the same rag he used on his hands, then ducked back under the hood. No wasted motion, no showmanship, just work. Jasmine had spent years in places where image was everything. Courtrooms, interviews, high-stakes negotiations. She'd learned to read people fast. And everything about Walter Grayson said, this man doesn't care who you are or what you've done. He only cares if it's broken, and if it can be fixed. And still, not a single word about who she was. No recognition, no assumptions, no sideways glances. That in itself was unusual. Jasmine Crockett wasn't exactly anonymous these days, especially not after the high-profile case she'd just walked out of, where she'd gone head-to-head with a state prosecutor and walked out the front door with half the courtroom whispering her name. Most people either praised her or judged her the moment she introduced herself, but Walter hadn't even asked, and oddly, it was calming. The silence between them wasn't cold, it was just focused, professional, pure. For the first time all day, no one was sizing her up, just a man and a machine, and a job that needed doing. Then after several minutes of methodical movement, he reached down, tightened something with a firm twist, and stepped back. He didn't look up, just said quietly, almost to himself, "Found it." Jasmine stood near the wall, arms folded, eyes on the man working under her car's hood. His movements were slow but sure, like he wasn't guessing, just remembering. He checked the belts, touched the hoses, listened with his hands as much as his ears. She didn't say anything, not yet. The silence felt thick, but not uncomfortable. Then, without looking at her, he spoke, low and steady. "So, what do you do?" The question came like it meant something, not just small talk. Jasmine answered without thinking. "I'm a lawyer." He glanced at her, then looked back down at the engine. "What kind?" "Civil rights," she said. "Mostly the kind nobody wants. Wrongful arrests, police cases, stuff that gets ugly." He let out a quiet grunt, not surprise, not judgment, just acknowledgement. "Tough business." She gave a small shrug. "Someone's got to do it." He didn't reply right away, just kept working, tools clicking softly in the quiet garage. Then he said, "I respect that. Lot of people talk, not many do." Jasmine looked at him. "Yeah, well, doing it doesn't make you popular." He nodded, still focused on the engine. "No, it makes you tired." That hit harder than she expected. She watched him for a moment, his worn hands, his stained shirt, the lines on his face that looked like they came from years of squinting through heat and noise. She thought about her day, about the judge who barely let her speak, the jury who avoided her eyes, the officer on the stand who lied without flinching. "It's not about what's right anymore," she said. "It's about who's louder, who's richer, who gets to walk out smiling." Walter didn't argue. "Yeah, truth doesn't win, not unless it's useful." She let out a breath. "I didn't go to law school to play games." He wiped his hands on an old rag, voice low. "And I didn't open this shop to fix trash. But here we are." They shared a quiet moment. Two people from different lives, both worn down by systems that didn't care who they crushed. Jasmine leaned her head back against the wall, staring up at the flickering light. "Everything's about speed now. Quick wins. Easy answers. Nobody wants to learn how to fix anything. Just throw it out. Buy new." Walter nodded slowly. "Same with people." She looked at him. "Break something in a man these days, they don't ask what happened. They just move on to the next." Jasmine swallowed hard. "I've felt that." He met her eyes. "We all have." The tools went quiet. The room did too. But for the first time that day, Jasmine didn't feel like she had to fight for space in the room. Walter didn't flatter her, didn't challenge her. He just understood. And sometimes that was enough. Walter had just finished tightening the last bolt when he paused. His hand gripped the edge of the car for balance, his shoulders stiff. Then came the cough. It started small, but it didn't stay that way. Deep, rough, like something stuck inside that had been there too long. Jasmine looked up immediately. It wasn't the kind of cough that came and went. It was the kind you live with, one that builds over time and settles in your chest like it owns the place. Walter turned slightly, covering his mouth with the back of his hand. When it stopped, he stood still for a second, breathing through his nose like he didn't want her to notice. But she already had. "You all right?" she asked. Her tone wasn't soft. It was steady, like she was asking for the truth, not comfort. Walter wiped his hand on the same rag he'd been using all day and gave a tired smile. "Just a cough," he said. "Old man lungs. Been like this a while." Jasmine didn't buy it, but she didn't push. She just watched him. He caught her stare and added, "I still move. Still work. That's all that matters." She nodded slowly. "Doesn't mean it's nothing." He let out a breath, almost a laugh. "No, it doesn't. But I've carried worse than this." There was no drama in his voice, just a man stating facts, like someone who didn't trust the luxury of complaining. Jasmine had seen that before, in people who'd been told too many times to tough it out, to keep going no matter what it cost. People who believed if they stopped moving, the world would forget them. She leaned against the wall, her arms folded, and kept her eyes on him. The air was quiet again. The kind of quiet that held more weight than words. "You ever get it checked out?" she asked. Walter shook his head, not even looking at her. "Ain't got time for hospitals. Don't got the money either. I know what they'll say anyway." "What's that?" He finally looked over, his voice flat. "That something's broken, and I can't afford to fix it." That hit her, not because it was dramatic, but because it was honest. Jasmine had spent years fighting a system that treated people exactly like that. People who worked their whole lives and still couldn't afford to rest. People who waited too long to get help because they had no choice. Walter wasn't stubborn. He was surviving the only way he knew how, by pretending he was fine until he wasn't. And deep down, Jasmine understood that better than anyone. The engine gave a low, clean hum. Steady, alive, no more coughing, no more shaking. Walter stepped back from the car, wiping his hands on that same rag, now streaked black and brown. Jasmine watched him from the passenger side, arms crossed. He didn't look tired, but he moved like someone who should have been done an hour ago. She waited a moment, then reached into her coat pocket, pulled out her wallet, and stepped forward without a word. She held out a few folded bills. Nothing dramatic, just quiet respect. Payment for time, for effort, for a man who didn't ask but damn well earned it. "How much?" she asked, her tone even. Walter glanced down at the money, then back up at her. His face didn't change. No tension, no smile, just calm and final. He gave a short shake of his head. "Don't worry about it." Jasmine frowned slightly. "I do worry about it," she said. "You fixed it. You should be paid." Walter raised an eyebrow and gave a small shrug. "Didn't take long, just a loose clamp. Few minutes of listening, that's all." She didn't move. The money stayed in her hand. "Still, your hands did the work. That means something." He looked at her for a long second, not coldly, not sharply, just with the kind of patience that comes from living long enough to see through people. Then he said, quiet but firm, "If you really want to pay me, next time you're driving through, bring me a coffee. Black, no sugar, none of that sweet foam crap either, just strong and hot." Jasmine blinked. For a second, she wasn't sure he was serious, but he was. He meant every word. That was the deal. No pride in taking cash, but pride in naming his price. And his price was a simple cup of coffee. Something real, something human, something you share, not just hand over. She slowly closed her wallet and slipped it back into her coat. "All right," she said. "Black coffee, no sugar, just how you like it." Walter gave her a nod and then something rare, a small smile. Not polite, not performative, just real. "That's worth more to me than the bills in your pocket." Jasmine didn't smile back right away. Not because she wasn't moved, but because she was. This man, working in a garage held together by rust and willpower, with a cough that sounded like it came from the bones, had just reminded her of something the world kept trying to make her forget. Dignity doesn't always come wrapped in titles or money. Sometimes it shows up in silence, grease-stained hands, and a quiet refusal to be pitied. She looked at him one last time. "I'll bring two. Next time." He tilted his head. "That a bribe?" "No," she said. "That's respect." He nodded again, then turned back toward his bench, already cleaning up. And just like that, the moment passed. Nothing loud, nothing showy, just two people who understood each other, for reasons that didn't need to be explained. She watched him walk back into the garage, his steps slow but steady, that same rag slung over his shoulder like a badge. The Bentley's engine purred beneath her like it had never broken down at all, but Jasmine didn't start it right away. She sat there behind the wheel for a few long seconds, her hand on the gear shift, eyes still on the man inside. Something about Walter Grayson stayed with her, more than the way he worked, more than his silence. There was something heavy in him, something quiet but cracking, a man who was holding everything together because no one else would. She'd seen people like that before, usually on witness stands, usually right before they broke. The drive back to the city was quiet, too quiet. Traffic picked up once she got closer to downtown, but her thoughts didn't leave the back road, the garage, or the man who asked for coffee instead of cash. She should have felt good. The car ran smooth. Her schedule was back on track, but the whole thing sat in her chest like a weight she couldn't shake. Jasmine had walked out of courtrooms where grown men wept, where systems collapsed, where she had to hold her ground with blood in her mouth. But today, for reasons she didn't yet understand, it was that cough, the one Walter tried to hide, that haunted her more than anything else. The next few days were a blur. Meetings, calls, a case filing that dragged into the evening. But no matter how loud the city got, that garage in the middle of nowhere kept pulling at her. So on the fourth morning, Jasmine left early. No security detail. No assistant, just her and a coffee tray in the passenger seat, 2 cups still steaming, black, no sugar. She drove with purpose, eyes scanning the road like she was chasing something she couldn't name. She turned off the highway and onto that same cracked road, the same brittle grass, the same long stretch of telephone poles vanishing into heat and silence. And then she saw it, Grayson's auto. But something was off. The garage was dark, no noise, no tools clinking in rhythm, no half-repaired pickup idling out front. The air felt different, still and strange, like a breath being held. Jasmine pulled up, parked, and got out slowly. One of the coffee cups shook slightly in her hand. The other stayed untouched in the tray. The front door was shut, the window blinds drawn, but it was the sign taped to the inside of the glass that made her stop cold. Closed until further notice. The handwriting was uneven, written with a black marker that had started to fade in the heat. Jasmine stared at it for a few seconds, trying to piece it together. Her heart picked up. She stepped back and looked around. No movement, no sign of anyone. Just the hot wind and the hum of distant cicadas. Then she heard it, the sound of a broom scraping against concrete. Across the street, in the shade of a weather-worn awning, an old man was sweeping the sidewalk outside a small general store. He looked up, saw her, and paused. Jasmine walked toward him, careful but quick. "Excuse me," she said, holding up the coffee. "Do you know what happened to the man who runs the garage? Walter Grayson?" The old man nodded, his face folding into something sad and tired. "You just missed him. Ambulance came a few nights ago. He collapsed. Right there in the shop. Still had the wrench in his hand, they said." Jasmine felt her grip tighten around the coffee tray. "Is he all right?" The man sighed, resting both hands on the top of his broom. "They took him to County General. It's not the first time he's had trouble breathing, but this one, it looked bad. Should have seen a doctor years ago, but he wouldn't go. Said he couldn't afford to be sick." The words hit harder than they should have, not because they were surprising, but because they were predictable. Jasmine had spent a decade watching systems fail people exactly like Walter. Men who gave everything and got nothing. Men who worked their bodies into the ground because rest was for people with health insurance and time. This wasn't just a cough anymore. It was what always came after a lifetime of being told. Hold it in. Don't complain. Just keep going. She looked back at the garage, at the faded sign, at the silence where a man should have been working. "What room?" she asked quietly. The old man blinked. "Sorry?" "At the hospital," Jasmine said. "What room?" "I don't know the number," he replied, "but I know he's still there. Haven't seen anyone come by to visit, though. He kept to himself. Didn't really have people." Jasmine nodded, already turning back toward her car. The coffee had gone cold, but she didn't care. She slid into the driver's seat, started the engine, and pulled back onto the road, this time heading away from the garage toward the city, toward the hospital. The feeling in her chest had changed. It wasn't just worry anymore. It was anger at the system, at how normal this had become, at how a man could spend his life fixing everything and still fall apart alone. She didn't know what she was going to do yet, but she knew she wasn't about to let Walter Grayson disappear behind a hospital curtain without anyone remembering who the hell he was. Not if she had anything to say about it. Not while she still had a voice. The hospital parking lot felt colder than the road behind her. Jasmine slammed the car door and moved fast, coffee in hand, determination in her steps. The front desk was quiet, too quiet, and the receptionist barely looked up until she was standing right there, firm and direct. "I'm looking for a patient, Walter Grayson, admitted a few nights ago." The woman typed slowly, scanning her screen. "Room 217, she said. "End of the hall, stable, but you missed visiting hours." "I'm not here to visit," Jasmine replied, her voice low. "I'm here to remind someone he's not invisible." She didn't wait for permission. Her heels echoed down the long linoleum corridor, the buzz of fluorescent lights overhead, making everything feel too bright and too quiet all at once. The smell of antiseptic clung to the walls. Disinfectant, sickness, and time. Jasmine hated hospitals. They all looked the same. Places where people waited for answers that came too late, if they came at all. She found room 217 and stopped in front of the door. Took a breath, then pushed it open. The room was dim. Machines hummed softly beside the bed. Walter lay there, a thin blanket pulled to his chest, wires taped to his arms, oxygen hooked under his nose. But he was awake, eyes half open, watching the shadows on the ceiling like they were telling stories he hadn't finished listening to. She stepped inside slowly, the smell of the coffee still rising faintly from the tray. "Didn't think you were the type to take a break," she said, voice calm but cutting through the silence like a scalpel. Walter turned his head. It took effort. But when he saw her, something lit behind his eyes. A spark of recognition, maybe even something close to relief. He smiled, faint, but real. "Car break down again?" he asked, voice raspy, brittle at the edges. Jasmine walked to the chair beside him and sat down, set the coffee on the tray table. "No, still running smooth." He raised an eyebrow. "Then why are you here?" She looked at him, her gaze steady. "Because not everything that breaks makes noise, and some things need fixing more than a car." Walter closed his eyes for a second. A long exhale passed through cracked lips. "I told them I didn't need a hospital," he said. "Told the medics I'd be fine." "You passed out in your own garage, Walter. That's not fine." His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Just turned his head away, eyes on the wall now. She leaned forward. "I want to help. With the bills. With the meds. Whatever it takes." That made him look back, and this time the weight behind his stare was heavy. Not angry, but full of history. "No," he said. "Keep your money. I've been poor my whole life, and I don't need anyone rescuing me now." Jasmine blinked. "Why? What's the difference between help and care?" Walter let out a breath. "Because I've worked too damn long to start owing people now. Because taking money means admitting I can't stand on my own 2 feet anymore. And I'm not ready to say that, not yet." She didn't respond right away, because she knew what this was. Not just pride, but survival. The kind that comes after decades of being overlooked, stepped over, and told to wait your turn. Walter wasn't afraid of dying. He was afraid of losing the one thing he still owned: control. She glanced at the machines beside him. You were still working? Still helping people? With that cough, with whatever this is. You never stopped. He nodded slowly. Because stopping means you're done. And I'm not done. Then let me help you keep going, she said. He didn't answer, just stared at the ceiling again. Jasmine looked at him, this man who had given strangers more than most families gave their own. She thought about the world outside, how easy it was to forget people like him, to use them up and leave them behind when they couldn't carry the weight anymore. You ever wonder why nobody showed up before me? She asked, voice softer now. Why the waiting room's empty? Why the only person bringing you coffee is the stranger with the broken Bentley? He didn't answer. It's not right, she continued. You spend your life holding things together and then fall apart in silence. Walter looked at her again, and for a moment, his mask cracked. Just a little. Just enough. I didn't do it to be remembered, he said quietly. But you deserve to be, Jasmine replied. And I don't care what you think about charity. You didn't ask for anything. That's why I'm offering. He smiled again, a sad one this time. You don't give up easy, do you? No, she said, not when something's worth fighting for. He looked at the coffee on the tray, reached for it slowly, fingers trembling slightly from the IV. He took a sip, black, no sugar, just the way he liked it. Still hot, he muttered. Told you I'd bring it. They sat there in silence for a while. Not heavy, not empty, just quiet. Two people who had nothing in common, and somehow, everything. And as the machines beeped softly in the background, Jasmine made a decision, one that had nothing to do with justice in a courtroom or arguments in front of a jury. This man wasn't going to be forgotten, not on her watch. The coffee cup rested on the tray between them, steam fading, the moment settling into quiet. Walter leaned back against his pillow, eyes half closed, chest rising slow and uneven under the hospital blanket. Jasmine said nothing more. He had made his choice. Clear, final, and she respected that. She didn't push, didn't argue, not because she agreed, but because she understood. She'd spent too long in rooms where people's dignity was the first thing taken from them. Walter Grayson had built his entire life on holding things together with his own hands, and he wasn't about to let anyone take that away, not even her. But as she sat there watching the machines blink and breathe beside him, something began to stir in the back of her mind, a quiet spark. It started small, just a thought, but it grew fast, took shape. Because if Walter wouldn't take help for himself, maybe there was another way, a way that didn't insult his pride, a way that honored it. Jasmine shifted in her seat, her eyes sharp now, scanning the room like she was reading a deposition. The peeling paint, the cheap tile, the too thin blanket pulled over a man who had given everything and been left with nothing. And suddenly, it wasn't just about Walter anymore. It was about all the men like him, all the people she'd watched get pushed aside, the ones who worked their whole lives, built towns with their hands, kept things running long after everyone else stopped paying attention, then got forgotten the moment they couldn't stand upright. She thought about the courtroom last week, where a guilty cop walked free because of a loophole. She thought about the boy she defended last month, charged for stealing food while billionaires evaded taxes in silence. The system didn't break for people like Walter. It was built to pass over them, like they were nothing more than background noise in a louder world. But Walter had a story, a name, a legacy that deserved to last longer than a rusted sign swinging in the wind. She stood up slowly, her movements calm but charged with something new, something cold and clear. She looked at Walter, who drifted into a light doze, the coffee cup still resting beside him like a quiet promise. Jasmine didn't need to say anything out loud. Not yet. The plan wasn't finished, but it had begun. And once Jasmine Crockett started something, especially something worth fighting for, she didn't stop until it was done. She didn't look back when she left the hospital room. She didn't have to. The idea was already alive, pulsing beneath her skin like a fuse had been lit. Jasmine Crockett walked out of County General with nothing in her hands, but her mind was full. The city skyline rose in the distance, sharp against the morning haze, Steel and glass stacked like monuments to people who never got their hands dirty, and all she could think about was Walter Grayson, alone in that sterile room, hooked up to machines, still refusing help like a man trying to hold on to the last brick of a crumbling wall. By the time she reached her apartment, the plan had shape. Not a rescue, not a handout, something bigger, something that could last. Jasmine didn't believe in easy wins. She knew systems didn't bend unless someone broke them open. And if Walter wouldn't accept help for himself, she'd find a way to make his legacy untouchable. She started with her phone. Contacts, favors, quiet calls to people who owed her. Not politically, but personally. Journalists, organizers. One foundation director who once cried in open court after Jasmine got her brother's sentence overturned. She didn't sell them on sympathy. She sold them on purpose. This wasn't about charity. This was about craft, about passing something on. I'm not asking for donations, she told them. I'm asking you to invest in knowledge, in work, in real skills. You say you care about second chances? Prove it. Within a week, the money started moving. Next came the garage. Jasmine drove back out on a Sunday before dawn, alone, the road still soaked from a midnight rain. The garage stood there just like before, silent, stubborn, and sagging. But it wouldn't be forgotten. Not on her watch. She didn't tear anything down. She didn't paint it pretty. The outside stayed the same, grit and all. Inside she cleaned, cleared out old junk, rewired the lighting, replaced what had to be replaced, but left the benches scratched, left the tool racks uneven, left the faint oil stains on the floor because they were part of the story. She had a new sign made but didn't hang it yet, not until it earned the right to go up. Back in the city, she put out feelers, not on social media, not in press releases. She went to the places where the headlines never reached, old youth centers, community kitchens, halfway houses. She talked to people who didn't trust easy, kids who looked at her like another suit with a smile. But she wasn't selling a dream. She was offering work. You want to learn something real? She'd say. Something that can't be outsourced, replaced, or done by a machine? Some walked away. Some stared blankly, but a few, just enough, nodded. One of them was a boy named Malik, 19, one juvenile record, 2 years of sleeping in his cousin's car, zero trust in anything. Jasmine gave him an address, a time, and a promise. No lectures, no handouts, just tools and a chance to learn. The next day he showed up early. Then came another, and another. Jasmine worked nights planning schedules, balancing invoices, calling in favors from tradesmen, parts suppliers, even a retired auto instructor from a local high school who had nothing left to prove but still missed the sound of engines. She didn't want a nonprofit. She didn't want a press conference. What she built was something quieter, but stronger. A space where old skills could meet new hands, where pride came from what you could build, not what you could post. Still, not everyone got it. A local reporter called her asking if this was part of a rebranding effort. She hung up on him. One city councilman offered to support the initiative in exchange for a photo op and a mention in her next campaign. She told him he wasn't invited. This wasn't politics, it was personal. A tribute to a man who asked for nothing and deserved more than most. At night, she lay awake thinking about the kids who walked into that garage wide-eyed and quiet. About Walter still in that hospital room, not knowing what was building just outside his memory. She hadn't told him yet, not because she was hiding it, but because it wasn't ready. Not until it spoke for itself. And it would. Because for once, the system wasn't in control of the story. She was. She didn't tell him, not right away. Jasmine wanted him to see it, to feel it, the way it was meant to be felt, without expectation, without warning. The garage had always been his world, his battlefield, his chapel. And now it was waiting. Tools cleaned but not polished. Workbenches scarred, not replaced. The old spirit still lived in the walls, but something new hummed underneath. Young voices, new energy, and a heat in the air that had nothing to do with the weather. 3 weeks after his discharge, Walter Grayson returned to Grayson's auto on a gray morning that smelled like rain and rust. He moved slower now, a cane in one hand, stubbornness in the other. Jasmine didn't meet him at the door. She let him walk in on his own. Let him hear it first. The sound of sockets clinking, drills spinning, a half-laughed curse from someone struggling with a stripped bolt. Walter froze at the threshold. Inside his shop, were 6 teenagers crouched around 2 engine blocks, grease on their hands, sweat on their brows, eyes locked in focus. Malik was showing a younger kid how to angle a ratchet without stripping the head. Across the room, someone was rebuilding a carburetor with shaking fingers and a whole lot of courage. Walter stepped inside. "What the hell is this?" His voice wasn't loud, but it cracked through the garage like a dropped wrench. The kids froze. Tools paused midair. One looked like he might bolt for the back door. Jasmine finally stepped out from the office, holding a clipboard, calm as ever. She met his eyes. "This is your legacy," she said. He stared at her, jaw tight. "My garage wasn't a daycare." "No," Jasmine said. "It was a lifeline. You just didn't know how far it reached." Walter looked around again. The workbenches had been cleaned, sure, but they hadn't been cleared. His tools were still where he left them. The oil stains he'd spent decades earning still colored the floor. Nothing was shiny, nothing was fake, but it was different. He turned back to her, his voice lower now, like gravel dragged over concrete. "You changed it." Jasmine didn't blink. "No, I built on it. You laid the foundation, Walter. I just opened the doors." He didn't answer right away, just looked at her, then back at the kids. Malik, who nodded at him cautiously, trying to hide the fear in his posture. A girl in a flannel shirt was watching closely, waiting to be yelled at, expecting the worst. And Jasmine knew what Walter saw in that moment. Not mess, not chaos, but hunger. Hunger for skill, hunger for belonging. The same hunger he'd carried when he first opened that garage 50 years ago, with nothing but a tool belt and grit. He exhaled slowly. "They don't know a damn thing," he muttered. "Then teach them," Jasmine said. "The right way, the way you were taught, or maybe the way you wish you'd been." Silence settled again, heavy but full. Walter's fingers curled tighter around the cane. His chest rose with something caught between pride and fear. The shop was alive in a new way now, not louder but fuller. He didn't ask for this. He didn't want to be anyone's symbol. But somehow the world had chosen him anyway. And Jasmine, she wasn't apologizing for it. Not now, not ever. Walter didn't say yes. Not with words, he never did. But the next morning he was back at the shop. He didn't bring tools, just showed up in that same flannel shirt, a half limp in his step, cane tapping on concrete. He stood in the doorway like he was still deciding whether or not to come in. Inside, the garage was alive with the soft chaos of learning, grunts of frustration, the clatter of tools dropped, the occasional click when someone got something right. Then he saw him, a kid, maybe 17, struggling with a brake caliper, hands shaking, sockets slipping, whole body twisted at the wrong angle, sweat running down his temple. His name was Eli, new, quiet, trying hard not to be noticed. The brake line hissed slightly as pressure leaked from the bleed valve he hadn't tightened all the way. Walter's jaw tightened. He sighed, loud enough to turn heads. The boy looked up, startled. Walter stepped forward. "You're holding it wrong," he muttered, voice flat. "That wrench is going to strip the bolt." Eli froze. I thought You're thinking too much," Walter cut in. He knelt, slowly, painfully, but with purpose. He reached for the wrench, turned it in Eli's hand. "Here, thumb on top, elbow locked. Let the torque do the work, not your wrist." He tightened the bolt in one clean, steady motion, then leaned back. "Now you try." Eli did. This time it held. The bolt clicked into place with a satisfying snap. The kid's face lit up like someone had handed him a secret. Walter stood, wincing slightly, and gave a small nod. "Better." From that moment, the shift began. He didn't call it teaching. He didn't wear a whistle or carry a clipboard. But day after day, Walter returned. Quiet, grouchy, exacting. He barked at them when they got it wrong. mocked them when they fumbled basic tools. That's not a wrench. That's a paperweight if you use it like that. He snapped when they cut corners. If you don't care about the job, then go home. This isn't a shortcut shop. But he never walked away. He stood beside them, corrected their grip, showed them where to listen to the engine, not just look at it. He taught them that every bolt had a story, every leak had a reason, and every machine was just waiting for someone to listen hard enough. And slowly they listened, not just to the cars, but to him. He didn't make it easy. That was the point. Walter had spent a lifetime proving himself to people who never thought he was enough. Too poor, too stubborn, too old. He knew what it meant to be doubted, to be overlooked. So he made sure these kids earned it. Not because he didn't believe in them, but because he wanted them to believe in themselves when no one else would. And the kids, they came back every morning, earlier than asked, staying later than needed. They started bringing notebooks, drawing diagrams, asking questions that weren't about just how to fix something, but why it broke in the first place. Jasmine watched all of it from the edge. She never interfered. She didn't need to. This wasn't hers anymore. It was his. One afternoon, 2 weeks in, Walter was leaning over the hood of an old Ford with Malik. The carburetor was being stubborn. Again. Walter had explained the adjustment process 3 times already. Malik had nodded every time. Gotten it wrong every time. Walter pulled back, exasperated. You listening to me, or just waiting for me to shut up? Malik looked up, shoulders tense. I'm listening, I haven't done it before. Walter's eyes narrowed. That's the whole point of being here. You haven't done it. That's why I'm showing you. I know, Malik snapped back, frustration rising, but I didn't grow up around this stuff. I don't have a dad who showed me how to hold a socket wrench. I'm trying, all right? Walter stared at him. The garage went still. Then Walter nodded. Just once. Trying's good, he said, but doing's better. Come here. Watch again. And he showed him. Slower this time. Not because Malik needed it slower, but because Walter knew what it felt like to need someone to believe you were worth the time. Days blurred into weeks. Walter began assigning tasks. You two, change the oil in Bay 2. Run compression on that engine. Pull the plugs and tell me what's wrong with them. No one argued. Not anymore. They wanted the challenge. Wanted the respect that came when Walter didn't scold them. Just nodded and moved on. But it wasn't just about cars. One night Jasmine walked into the garage late. Most of the kids had gone home. Walter was sitting on an overturned bucket, sipping coffee from a metal thermos. Malik was still there, wiping down a set of tools. Walter glanced at her as she approached. You know, he said quietly, he's not bad. Jasmine raised an eyebrow. That a compliment? High praise, Walter muttered. She smiled. They look up to you. Walter didn't answer right away. Then he said, that's the part I didn't plan for. Jasmine sat on the edge of the workbench, watching the shadows move across the walls. You've always been a teacher. You just didn't have a classroom. He took another sip of coffee, his eyes distant. I never had much use for speeches, but I've buried too many good men who didn't get a chance to pass anything on. You're changing that, Jasmine said. Walter didn't reply, but the silence was his answer. They didn't put up the new sign until a month later. The new sign wasn't flashy, just thick wood, carved by hand, letters painted in the same deep red Walter had once used to stencil his name on toolboxes 50 years ago. It hung straight this time, bolted firm, centered above the garage doors with proud, weather-worn dignity. Grayson Garage and Training House, since 1974, fixing more than engines. There was no ribbon cutting, no city council speech, no camera crews. Jasmine made sure of that. The story didn't need headlines. The headlines never came for people like Walter anyway. Not when they built instead of burned. Not when their legacy couldn't be packaged in 30-second sound bites. And yet, the lot was fuller than it had ever been. Word had spread, but not through billboards. It moved quietly, through whispers in halfway houses, text threads between social workers, and benches at bus stops where someone would say, I heard there's a place where they'll teach you real work if you're willing to sweat for it. By the time summer rolled around, there were more applicants than tools. Jasmine kept a waiting list on a clipboard by the office door. Kids walked in from all over, some with records, some just running from a life that felt stuck. No guarantees, no salaries, just hard work, sharp lessons, and the chance to become something more than what their past said they were. And Walter? Walter still coughed, still leaned on his cane when the pain got bad, still shouted when someone used a Phillips where a flathead was needed. But something was different, subtle, quiet, like a storm that had passed but left the sky clear. He barked at a new trainee for mixing up the oil types. "Kid, if you put synthetic in that old Dodge again, I swear I'll hand you a bus ticket and a banana." He growled when someone brought him coffee that tasted like it came out of a hotel lobby. He complained when Jasmine replaced the broken fan in the corner. "That thing's older than half these kids. Still worked fine. Probably had another 10 years in it." But the sharpness had softened. The scowl cracked more often. Sometimes, after shouting, he'd linger for just a second and mutter something like, "Good effort, though. Just fix it before someone dies." And sometimes, more and more lately, he smiled. Not for show, not because anyone was looking, just because the sound of socket wrenches, loud laughter, and music playing low from a dusty radio felt like home again. 1 year after Jasmine first brought coffee to a hospital room, the garage hummed like a living machine. Nothing about it was glamorous. The walls still peeled in places. The floor still carried the dark memory of oil leaks and burnt rubber. But the heart of it beat stronger than ever. In Bay 2, a 1991 Cadillac sat on jacks. 4 teens circled around it, arguing about brake lines. One girl wiped sweat from her forehead with the edge of her sleeve and said, "Walter said if we mess up again, we're going to be washing parts until next month." A boy next to her grinned. "You mean I'm going to be washing parts? You're his favorite." "I am not. You totally are." "She listens," Walter barked from across the room, voice cutting like a blade through metal. "That's what makes her the favorite." The room cracked up, but under the laughter, under the jokes and grease-stained gloves, there was reverence. Walter had become something none of them expected. Proof. Proof that survival wasn't about perfection, that dignity didn't come from degrees or clean records or shaking the right hands. It came from being needed and being willing. One evening, long after most of the kids had gone home, Walter stood alone in the garage. He stared up at the new sign, hand resting on a wrench like it was a piece of him. Jasmine was sitting on the office steps, coffee in hand, watching him from a distance. The garage lights buzzed above them, casting long shadows on the concrete. "You think they get it?" Walter asked, not turning. "Get what?" she replied. He shrugged. "What this place is, what it means." Jasmine took a sip, then stood and walked over. "Maybe not yet, but they will. They feel it." Walter nodded slowly. Then after a pause, he added, "I thought I'd be forgotten by now." She looked at him. "You were never the kind of man easy to forget." He gave a small, tired smile. "I'm still a pain in the ass." Exactly. They stood in silence, both of them looking at the shop like it was a living thing now. Because it was. Walter let out a rough cough, pulled a tissue from his pocket, then shoved it away like he always did. But there was no bitterness in him. Not anymore. Just acceptance. And something more. He wasn't a footnote now. He wasn't the last man in a dying trade. He was the start of something that might outlive him. The next morning, someone brought him coffee again. Too sweet. Too weak. He spat it back in the cup and growled, "What the hell is this, dessert?" Malik, who just walked in, grinned and called out, "She tried. Give her a break." Walter waved a hand. "Try again tomorrow, or give me the pot and a shovel. I'll roast the beans myself." But as he turned away, wiping his hands on a rag, he was smiling again. Really smiling. Because behind him, tools were clinking, voices were rising, and engines, broken ones, were being made whole again by hands that once didn't know they were capable. He wasn't just teaching them to fix machines, he was teaching them they mattered. And for the first time in decades, Walter Grayson didn't feel invisible. He felt seen. The sky above the garage was beginning to dim, streaked with gold and smoke blue, one of those Texas evenings that made everything feel like it had weight. Inside, the hum of work had died down. Tools cleaned, bays swept, the radio off. Walter was locking up for the night, cane in one hand, the door's stubborn frame in the other. Jasmine leaned on the fender of a half-repaired truck nearby, arms crossed, her eyes following him like she had from the very beginning. He paused at the doorway, looked back. The lights above still glowed, but softer now. The new sign caught the last bit of sunlight, and in its reflection, for just a breath, he didn't see the cracked walls or the rusted corners. He saw something whole, alive, bigger than him. And maybe that was the point. This story isn't about fixing a car. It never was. It's about what gets left behind when the world moves too fast. It's about the kind of man who works with his hands, while others build empires from paper and power. It's about a garage that became a graveyard of memory until someone walked in and said, "This isn't over yet." Walter Grayson never asked to be a symbol. He never wanted attention, a documentary, or his name on a plaque. He just wanted to work, to teach, to be useful in a world that had long since decided men like him didn't matter anymore. For decades, he showed up every morning with no fanfare, no audience, and no safety net. While others were building brands, he was rebuilding engines. While others were pitching futures, he was salvaging broken things from the past. And the world? It didn't care. Not until Jasmine Crockett walked into his shop with a broken car and a sharper instinct than most politicians had in their bones. She saw something most people miss. She saw not just a man, but a systemic failure standing on 2 feet. A life built with dignity that was one hospital bill away from vanishing. A walking reminder of what happens when society forgets its builders. Here's the truth that stings. In this country, if you don't sell, you disappear. We don't reward the slow, steady hands. We don't notice the people who keep our wheels turning until the wheels stop. We praise innovation, speed, and disruption, but we ignore legacy, patience, and craft. And when those who've given everything finally collapse, from illness, from time, from being invisible for too long, we write them off like worn-out machines, replaceable, disposable, forgotten. Walter fought that reality the only way he knew how, by showing up day after day, even when his body screamed, even when his lungs failed, even when the world kept walking past his shop without a glance. And Jasmine? She fought the same battle, different arena, same war. Courtrooms instead of carburetors, briefs instead of bolts. But both of them knew what it meant to be underestimated, dismissed, and left to carry too much. That's why they found each other. That's why the garage became something more than just a space with tools. It became a counterpunch to the system, a challenge to the idea that dignity expires with age, or that second chances are just marketing slogans. Because once Jasmine took what Walter built and opened it to those who had been cast aside, a chain reaction started, quiet but unstoppable. The lesson here isn't about generosity, it's about justice. Walter didn't need a handout. What he needed, what everyone like him needs, was for the world to stop pretending that only the loudest voices matter. Jasmine didn't fix him. She didn't save him. She listened to him. She amplified him. And in doing so, she created something radical. A space where broken things, including people, didn't get discarded. They got rebuilt. No branding, no charity gala, no inspirational TikToks, just work. Hard, messy, honest work. The kind that stains your hands and steals your spine. The kind that leaves something behind long after you're gone. In the months that followed, something remarkable happened. Kids who once skipped court dates now showed up early to rebuild starters. Young men who used to run from cops now leaned over carburetors beside Walter, asking questions, learning names of parts, learning patience. Girls who'd been told they weren't strong enough to work a garage started carrying gearboxes like veterans. No one cared about resumes. No one asked what you did before you got here. What mattered was whether you showed up, whether you listened, whether you were willing to fail in front of others and come back the next day ready to learn. Walter didn't sugarcoat anything. He didn't lower the bar. If anything, he raised it. Because he knew, when no one expects anything from you, That's exactly when you need someone who demands more. That's what he became. A man who once believed his name would die with his last breath, now had a generation repeating it in grease-stained gloves and steady hands. But maybe the most human part of this story is this. Walter never fully believed he deserved it. Even when the garage filled with laughter. Even when they painted his name on the wall in big black letters. Even when Jasmine handed him the new sign and said, "This isn't a tribute, it's a continuation." He still struggled to accept that his work had meant enough. Because that's what the world does to people like him. It convinces them they're lucky just to survive, and that asking for more is selfish. It convinces them that dying quietly is nobler than being seen. But the truth? Being seen, really seen, isn't selfish. It's justice. So when the camera pans out at the end, no spotlight, no applause, just the sound of tools clinking, a radio humming low, and Walter sitting on a workbench, coughing into a rag, but smiling quietly at something only he understands. That's the moment that says it all. Because for the first time in a long, long time, he knows he mattered. He wasn't forgotten, and he never will be. Not because the world suddenly changed, but because someone stood up, saw through the noise and said, "This man's story isn't over." The tools kept clinking, the engines kept turning, the garage lights hummed through the night. But the story didn't end there, and it isn't supposed to, because this isn't just Walter's story. It's not just Jasmine's. It's ours. It's yours. It belongs to every single person who's ever been told they're too old to matter, too broken to fix, or too far gone to be brought back. It belongs to the kids who got one mistake branded on their records like a curse, and to the workers who gave their lives to their craft only to be pushed aside for something newer, faster, cheaper. And if you're sitting there thinking, someone else will help them, you're wrong. That's the lie the world keeps telling us, that someone else will fix it, that someone else will show up, that someone else will carry the weight. But Walter Grayson proved that all it takes is one person willing to stand in the wreckage and say, "Not yet, not like this." So what now? Now it's your turn. You don't need to build a garage from the ground up. You don't need to be a lawyer or a teacher or a mechanic, but you do need to look around at your neighborhood, your town, your city, and ask, who's been forgotten here? Who's been working in the shadows too long? Maybe it's an old shop owner on the corner no one visits anymore. Maybe it's a kid who just needs someone to believe in them before the world chews them up. Maybe it's you. You want change? Then stop waiting for permission. You want justice? Then build it from the ground like a carburetor. Bolt by bolt, cut knuckle by cut knuckle, until it runs. Because real justice doesn't arrive with a press release. It shows up in dirty hands, tired backs, and voices that say, "I see you. I know you. You're still here, and you're not done yet. So fix something. Teach someone. Fund someone. Open a door. Wipe the dust off a forgotten name. Don't post about change. Be the damn spark plug that starts it. And when you do it without cameras. Do it without hashtags. Do it like Walter did. Because it's right. Because it matters. Because legacies don't build themselves. People do. And if you need a place to start, find the nearest broken thing. Then fix it. Thank you for watching until this moment, and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference.